Gentlemen, President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, and Secretary of State of the United States, John Kerry. The floor is with the President of Ukraine.
Шановний пане державний секретар, шановний Джон, шановні пані і панове, я щиро радий привітати вас в Україні. Для мене і для всіх українців, і для всього світу ваш візит – це є свідчення потужної підтримки України, яку демонструють Сполучені Штати Америки на найбільш відповідальному і визначальному етапі розвитку нашої держави. Цей візит є глибоко символічним і ми дуже цінуємо ваш приїзд, шановний пане державний секретар. Це також красномовний факт високої довіри, яку надають Сполучені Штати, і свідчення ефективної координації, яку ми досягли між Києвом і Вашингтоном. Сьогоднішні плідні переговори свідчать про справді глибоке змістовне наповнення україно-американського стратегічного партнерства від нашої співпраці в сфері реформ до спільної протидії в сфері безпеки. Я хотів би вибачитись за те, що наша прес-конференція почалася годиною пізніше, але це лише свідчить про те, який великий порядок денний є в наших україно-американських відносинах, і можу підтвердити, що ці переговори були дуже ефективними. Ми відзначаємо дієвість нашої взаємодії в створенні ефективної системи боротьби з корупцією в Україні. Ми вдячні нашим американським партнерам за постійну увагу до України в ці складні часи, за потужну експертну допомогу, яку надають нам Сполучені Штати Америки, за потужну фінансову допомогу, яку ми отримуємо з Вашингтону. І це відіграє важливу роль у відновленні економічної стабільності і економічного зростання в Україні і проведенню необхідних реформ. Нам вдалося з нуля розгорнути нову систему антикорупційних органів і не лише забезпечити законодавче їх функціонування, а сьогодні ми бачимо вже ефективну взаємодію антикорупційного бюро, спеціалізованої антикорупційної прокуратури, Генеральної прокуратури і нового генерального прокурора, Служби безпеки, нової поліції. І це вже приносить відповідні результати. Ви бачите, скільки у нас потужних кроків було зроблено буквально за останні 10 днів, починаючи з затримки прокурорських працівників, перших заступників губернаторів, чиновників уряду і ефективної дії парламенту, який надав декілька днів тому згоду на притягнення до відповідальності і народних депутатів. Ми впевнені в тому, що це є лише початок рішучої боротьби з корупцією, для якої немає і не повинно бути своїх чи чужих. Ніякого даху для корупціонерів не буде. І сьогодні я впевнений, що всі мають твердо це почути і твердо це зрозуміти. Ми сподіваємося на підтримку Сполучених Штатів Америки, ми про це сьогодні детально говорили з паном державним секретарем, і імплементації змін до Конституції в частині судової реформи, з активного залучення громадянського суспільства, проведення прозорих конкурсів при формуванні нового Верховного суду України в надзвичайно стислі терміни. Це є ключове для створення інвестиційного клімату, це є ключове для антикорупційної боротьби, але головне, це є ключове для реалізації права українців на право. Ми визначили також важливе значення співпраці нашої в питаннях посилення обороноздатності нашої держави і допомога Сполучених Штатів в реформуванні Збройних сил України, постачання рішення, техніки, призначення навчань, спільних тренінгів є дуже важливим етапом побудови ефективної співпраці і координації в оборонній сфері. впевнений, що ця співпраця з часом буде лише посилюватись. І в контексті протидії викликам безпеки ми відзначили, що Сполучені Штати Америки є і залишаються ключовим союзником України на міжнародній арені. Нас об'єднують спільні цінності, спільні розуміння, що цивілізований світ тільки разом може ефективно протистояти спробам дестабілізувати глобальну систему міжнародної безпеки та співробітництва. Безперечно, що ми не обійшли увагою і теми надання гарантії безпеки України з боку Сполучених Штатів на фоні Будапештського меморандуму. Для українського народу важливо відчувати, що в протистоянні складним зовнішнім викликам з нами поруч стоїть потужний стратегічний партнер. Розраховуємо, що і Конгрес, і два адміністрації і надалі сповідують принцип наступництва і ефективної підтримки України. Адже наш успіх – це є ваш успіх і наш спільний успіх. Ми виходимо з цього принципу. Особливу увагу під час наших переговорів ми приділили питанням проблематиці російської агресії проти України, ситуації на Донбасі і в Криму. Ми детально обговорили. Існує повне розуміння. Росія та підтримані нею бойовики несуть виключну відповідальність за пробуксовування мирного процесу на Донбасі. Ми, українці, віддані імплементації мінських домовленостей, які вважаємо дорожньою картою для мирного врегулювання на Донбасі. Однак ми наголошували раніше і наголошуємо зараз, не може бути дієвого врегулювання без забезпечення сталої і всеохоплюючої безпеки. І впевнені в тому, що безпековий компонент є з ключових компонентів мінських домовленостей і наполягаємо на рішучому його втіленні в життя. І лише в умовах належного рівня безпеки політичний процес має перспективу. Це ключова позиція України, і ця логіка та підходи Києва сприймаються нашими союзниками. Хотів би відзначити принципову позицію Сполучених Штатів Америки в питанні суверенітету, територіальної цілісності України, включно з Кримом. Це позиція держави, яка дійсно відчуває відповідальність за гарантування верховенства принципів та норм міжнародного права. Порушення базових засадничих принципів післявоєнного світоустрою не можуть і не будуть толеруватися. Важливим елементом наших сьогоднішніх переговорів була також символічність візиту пана Керрі в Україну, який відбувається, хочу на цьому окремо наголосити, напередодні Варшавського саміту НАТО. В рамках цього саміту відбудуться дві надзвичайні події. Перше – це засідання Комісії Україна-НАТО на найвищому рівні. І зустріч, друге – це зустріч в унікальному форматі країн Великої П'ятірки. Це є Сполучені Штати Америки, Німеччина, Франція, Британія і Італія. Так само, як ми зустрічалися в Уельсі в 2014 році. І передбачено достатньо часу для того, щоб ми в цьому форматі з лідерами країн Великої П'ятірки обговорили питання безпеки і питання реформ в Україні. Це є також підтвердження нашого обопільного інтересу до зміцнення особливого партнерства. В Україні очікують, що за результатами зустрічі в форматі саміту НАТО і у форматі Комісії Україна-НАТО, і в форматі Великої П'ятірка плюс Україна ми скоординуємо заходи подальшого забезпечення примусу Росії до повної імплементації мінських домовленостей та початку деокупації Криму. Адже ми продовжуємо наполягати на започаткуванні міжнародного механізму деокупації півострова. Ключове питання в цьому контексті – це є солідарність і спільна відповідальність. Завдяки цьому і дотепер зберігається єдність міжнародної спільноти щодо необхідності збереження санкційного тиску на Росію. Це не є панічним, це не є наказання, це є мотивація Росії для того, щоб повністю імплементувати Мінські угоди. І передусім для того, щоб Росія надалі була за столом переговорів і нарешті розпочала виконувати взяті на себе зобов'язання. Хотів би ще раз подякувати вам, пане державний секретар, за ту постійну увагу, яку ви надаєте Україні, за ту постійну підтримку, яку ми відчуваємо з вашого боку, з боку уряду Сполучених Штатів Америки, і за дуже вчасний візит, і за ефективні і конструктивні переговори, які ми щойно мали в дусі зміцнення стратегічного партнерства між Україною та Сполученими Штатами Америки. Дуже дякую за увагу.
The floor is given to the Secretary of State of the United States, John Forbes Kerry.
Well, excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and good afternoon to everybody. I want to thank President Poroshenko for, first of all, generous welcome back here to Kiev. I'm really happy to be here in the summertime. The last two times I've been here, I think it was in the dead of night, and it started that way, and it was cold. In fact, snowing. I'm very grateful to President Poroshenko for his generous welcome here today. But more importantly, as he has just described, we had a very constructive and longer than we planned initial meeting, and we're going to start from here to meet even further. And later today, I will be seeing Prime Minister Groisman and Foreign Minister Clinton and Mr. Perubi. And I want to thank all of those who are working, particularly the people of Ukraine, who have displayed a remarkable level of courage, determination, and a vision for the future that they want here in their country. This has been a difficult journey already. It still remains difficult, even as some lives are lost on the lines of separation. And that concerns all of us in public life. The United States is not satisfied with any day that goes by that lives are lost. And so there is an urgency that we do feel with respect to the full implementation of the Minsk agreement. I just say that this Monday, it was July 4th in the United States of America. We have the privilege of celebrating, though still a young country, 240 years of independence. And I begin with that thought because there is a deep connection between the ideals celebrated in the United States on July 4th and the goals that Ukrainians have displayed so clearly that they share with us. The American Declaration of Independence lists specific grievances that were settled long ago. But the founding principles, frankly, remain as relevant today as ever before. A simple thought, but a beautiful thought, that all men and women are created equal, and that all are endowed with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The same or similar expressions are included in the freedom declarations of many countries now. And nowhere is that quest for liberty and dignity more immediate or more compelling than here in Ukraine. 2.5 years ago, thousands of Ukrainians took to Maidan Square in an historic moment of a demand for sovereign and democratic country that they wanted and deserved. And I will personally never forget walking down Institutska Street in March of 2014 and seeing the barricades, seeing the tires, the barbed wire, the bullet holes in the street lamps, and the photographs that had been put up in a makeshift memorial to all of those who put their lives on the line for the future of this country. Americans know from our own history that the democratic road is filled with obstacles and that the journey is not completed overnight. But Ukraine's democratic potential is far brighter today, now, than it was even since my last visit in February of 2015. Since I was last here, Ukrainians have a new patrol police, which we are privileged to have been helpful in the State Department in helping to develop. A new National Anti-Corruption Bureau, greater transparency in their government, laws that have been passed to try to help the transition from state-owned enterprise to private sector, important efforts in the energy sector, other reforms have been put in place. In just the past 70 days, the Rada has approved constitutional amendments to reinforce judicial independence, eliminate wasteful subsidies, and to begin implementing a broad civil service reform. In any country, anywhere, at any time, that's a pretty significant agenda and a pretty significant set of accomplishment. But here, where there still continues to be difficulties with respect to security, it's even more profound a statement of purpose and of commitment and of accomplishment. So Ukraine is undeniably moving forward. But I think we all agree that the job isn't done. More has yet to be done to strengthen Ukraine's democracy. And the imperative of reform was one of the major themes of our discussion today. And I want to thank President Poroshenko and his team for their thoughtful consideration of the steps yet to be taken and for their commitment to take those steps. With the President and other leaders today, I am discussing Ukraine's efforts to clean up the Prosecutor General's office and the judicial system, to tackle corruption and break the oligarchic stranglehold, to stay the course with the IMF, to strengthen Ukraine's financial system, to privatize the economy, and to improve the business climate, to attract capital because of all of those other reforms that are taking place. Everybody knows that those who invest for the purpose of, yes, doing good, but also to try to make money. And so the ease with which they can invest, the transparency with which they can invest, the accountability that exists, all of that helps to attract the investment that is so critical to the growth of the economy. But let me point out that contrary to many predictions, because of the difficult decisions that President Poroshenko and his team have made, Ukraine is growing today. Its economy, unlike other economies in the region, is growing. And the prognosis for growth next year is even double what it is today. So that indicates the positive reactions that come from difficult political choices. In addition to that, let me point out that the people of Ukraine have already sacrificed a lot to be able to change the system. I think Ukraine's leaders honor that sacrifice by ensuring clean, accountable government and by rejecting easy pleas to an easy populism and demagoguery that doesn't take you forward, but only takes you backwards. And I have witnessed firsthand a resistance to that easy ability to be able to fall back into old and even corrupt habits. So long as Ukraine's democratic forces stay united and continue to make progress towards the goals that the people of Ukraine have expressed, I can assure you on behalf of President Obama and the American people, the United States will stand with Ukraine. And during our meetings today, we are also discussing the situation in eastern Ukraine. As I have said many times, the fastest way to truly resolve the conflict is through the full implementation of the Minsk agreements. Now, there should be no doubt about what that requires. A real, enforceable ceasefire on the contact line. Unfettered OSCE access to all of Donbass, including the border. The return of all hostages. Free and fair elections in Donbass that meet the OSCE standards and accord with Ukraine's constitution. The withdrawal of all foreign weapons and forces, and ultimately the return of Ukrainian sovereignty along its internationally recognized border. To be crystal clear, Ukraine is making a good faith effort to implement Minsk. There's no doubt in my mind about that. It has begun the process of granting special status and amnesty and decentralizing political power. And it is committed to do more as the security conditions allow. And today, I informed President Poroshenko that the United States will provide nearly $23 million in additional immediate humanitarian assistance to help thousands of vulnerable people who are affected by the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine. But without real security in the Donbass, an end to the bloodshed on the contact line, the use of heavy weapons, blockading of OSCE access, without that, Minsk is doomed to fail. Now, this was President Obama's message to President Putin in their phone call just yesterday, as they talked very frankly about the steps that are needed to be taken in order to move the process forward. And President Putin indicated that he does have a desire to try to see this process move forward, as does President Obama. And so we are hopeful that in the days ahead, that we will in fact be able to translate those expressions of hope in words in a telephone call into real actions that will make a difference. In Warsaw, the United States will continue our work with Germany and France in order to chart a course with President Poroshenko and his team to ensure that the level of security necessary to be able to allow for elections and the other political aspects of Minsk are able to go forward. So make no mistake, if Russia chooses the path of de-escalation and full implementation of Minsk, the international community, all of us, will welcome it. And we pledge to work very closely with President Poroshenko to make sure that his government and Ukraine is doing all in its power to live up to its responsibilities. If Russia does not move in the direction of embracing that possibility and de-escalating, then the sanctions will remain in place. The same is true with respect to Crimea. From the very beginning of the conflict, the very beginning of Russia's move to Crimea, the United States has said consistently that we do not and we will not recognize Russia's attempted annexation. And our sanctions that apply to the issue of Crimea will stay in place until ultimately that issue is resolved. In closing, I'll just note something that perhaps as I approach the final months of service as Secretary of State, as you look back and think about what has been happening, it is clear to me that one of the things I've learned after years of public life is that there is no end to the challenges, no end to the tests. Every generation faces its set of tests. The testing is constant. And it should be obvious today that governing effectively is as challenging today in today's world of rapid communication and extraordinary change. It is as challenging as it has ever been, even in countries that have been stable and democratic for a long period of time. Yes, Ukraine's leaders face extraordinary challenges, but let me also make it clear they have already proven that they are prepared to and capable of accomplishing important things. So I once again thank the President for his very warm welcome, for a productive and candid exchange this afternoon. And I assure everyone in this great country that the United States stands with the people of Ukraine in their desire to make their own choices about their own future. We will continue to work together to closely support a unified, peaceful, stable, sovereign, and democratic Ukraine. I thank you, and I'm pleased to join with the President in answering a few questions.
Dear journalists, we have one question from each side. From American side, first question to Reuters.
Yes, good afternoon. President Poroshenko, do you feel more optimistic about the possibility of further progress on Minsk, given your discussions today with Secretary Kerry? And what kinds of timeframes are you looking at here for a political settlement on it or agreement? And Secretary Kerry, you said that it was urgent to implement the security part of the Minsk protocol, and you had some positive words from the Kremlin yesterday. Do you believe that that can be implemented, the security that can be implemented before this administration ends? And when we come just to North Korea very briefly, you've imposed sanctions against the leader of North Korea. Do you think that can be effective without China making its making progress on its own?
Do I think that it what?
Well, thank you very much indeed for the question, because your question about the time frame, this is exactly what we are looking for. Time frame in a roadmap. What and when should be done? What is the sequence? What is the guarantee things to be implemented? I fully support Minsk Agreement. I want to remind you the name of the Minsk Agreement. This is the steps for the implementation of my peace plan. This is very important that everybody understands that there is no any other alternative of the Minsk Agreement. And I think we have a good progress in our discussion with our American, German, and French partners about the roadmap and about the sequence of steps necessary to be done. Everybody understands that the security component is a key issue. We should have a ceasefire, we should have a withdrawal of heavy artillery weapons, we should have keep this withdrawn artillery and ammunition, mortar, tanks in the sealed storage. We should have an uninterrupted access of the special monitoring mission of the OEC, both to the touchline, to the sealed storage, to the uncontrolled part of the Ukrainian-Russian border. And this is very important to make these efforts more effective by implementing the special armed police force of the OEC. And about the time frame, I'm interested to make it as fast as possible, because Ukraine paid a very high price. Every single day, we have lives of Ukrainian heroes. And a lot of my soldiers is wounded because of Russia is violating the ceasefire using the heavy artillery and weapons prohibited by Minsk Agreement. And with that situation, I think this is the very important, vital, if you want, choice for us to organize the situation when Russia will implement the Minsk Agreement. And your question is, am I optimistic enough? So I open you the confidential information. This is impossible to be the president of the country in a state of war and not to be optimistic, because this is the only way to return Ukrainian flag to the occupied territory. Yes, I'm optimistic, and I think that we can reach the result in a very short period of time. support of our partners' lives. Thank you.
Well, I'm also an optimist. And I think to have these jobs is a requirement. But I'm proudly an optimist because I think it's the way you get things done, is to believe in the possibilities. And yes, without excessive optimism, with a pure note of reality, I am convinced that in the time left, there's the ability, in short order, frankly, to begin the process of the full implementation. Now, I think that it is necessary to find a path forward that unites the interests of the parties in a way that is fair and sensible and provides assurance to both sides, to all sides, because there's more than one or two, that the requirements of Minsk are in fact being met, and being met in a way that gives everybody an assurance that their needs are going to be satisfied. How does that work? That means President Poroshenko is already moved significantly to develop the election law, to deal with the amnesty requirements, to focus on the political aspects of some decentralization. And that law is now considerably developed and documented in writing between the parties, though there is still some work to be done. The security piece, which is critical to Ukraine and Ukrainians and to the president, as he said, no president can sit there while people are being picked off, 2 a day or more, people are being wounded. So it is critical that there be security steps that are also being taken to give confidence to the president, to the Rada, to the people of Ukraine, that this is not a one-sided event. I'm convinced that over the course of the next days, it is possible to more fully develop the steps that everybody needs to take in order to achieve those assurances, to build that kind of confidence, and to achieve the end result that people want. And that's the work that our teams need to do, and our teams are ready to do that work. There will be, as the President mentioned, a Quint meeting. Germany, France, Britain, the United States, Italy will meet with the President. There will be a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Commission. So there'll be important conversations that will take place in the next 2 days. And then, obviously, diplomatically, it will be our job to follow up on that in every way possible in order to give life to what I just described, and we're going to try and do that. With respect to North Korea, the human rights abuses in North Korea are, without any question, among the worst anywhere in the world. The government continues to commit extrajudicial killings. There are enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrests, detention, forced labor, and torture. And many of these abuses are committed in the political prison camps, where currently an estimated 80,000 to 120,000 individuals are detained, including children and family members of the accused. So the report that we put out in the State Department is the first listing of persons determined to be responsible for serious human rights abuses and censorship in the DPRK. And we're going to continue to identify individuals as we obtain additional information and create accountability for actions for which a lot of people, those detained, those tortured, those killed, have no recourse but the goodwill of nations and people who will stand up and be their voices. Now, obtaining this kind of information, especially the identities of people below the top leadership is always a very, very difficult task when you have a closed country of the nature of the DPRK. In fact, this report represents the most comprehensive United States government effort to date to name the specific officials who are responsible for or associated with the worst aspects of the North Korea regime's repression. And we have taken this step because it is important to hold people accountable, responsible for serious human rights abuses and for the activities that the DPRK is engaged in. Now, the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act, passed by the United States Congress, requires a specific finding be made with respect to Kim Jong-un's responsibility for serious human rights abuses and censorship. And I think it's important, President Obama believes it's important, the Congress believes it's important, that all North Korean officials know and understand going forward that at all levels there are consequences for actions, and they hopefully might consider the implications of those actions going forward here. We're in close consultation with our allies, and I want to make this very, very clear with respect to China and the part of the question you asked about China's engagement. Of course, China's engagement is critical. We've always said that. In every visit I've made to Beijing, in every conversation we've had with the Chinese, we have emphasized the importance of China to trying to change the behavior of the DPRK and to trying to get to the six-party talks again to deal with the problem of the nuclear program. And it is our hope that China, I just talked to the foreign minister yesterday, and our hope that we will continue to cooperate as we have been in the last months, particularly with the UN Security Council resolution that we passed, in which China stepped up and significantly increased its own actions with respect to the behavior of the DPRK. So my hope is that this will make clear to the world that we're serious, and that the threat of a nuclear weapon in the hands of the DPRK, in the hands of Kim Jong-un, is unacceptable. We stand ready and prepared to go to talks, both to talk about the denuclearization, as well as to talk about a peace on the peninsula and a road to normal behavior and normal acceptance for the North, should they choose to behave like a normal country. And we remain obviously poised to try to get to that goal.
And from Ukrainian side, Interfax Ukraine.
Дякую. Атана Русова, Інтерфакс Україна. Запитання до обох спікерів. Скажіть, будь ласка, на які конкретні результати саміту НАТО у Варшаві ви очікуєте? І окреме запитання до пана президента. Які домовленості з країнами НАТО ви очікуєте і, можливо, з партнерами по нормандському формату також? Дякую.
Перш за все, я хотів би сказати, що Україна є єдиною країною, з якою під час саміту країн-членів НАТО відбувається окреме проведення засідання комісії Україна-НАТО на найвищому рівні. Друге, як я вже сказав, планується зустріч керівництва квінтету, лідерів країн Великої П'ятірки зі мною, де ми плануємо обговорити цілу низку питань, починаючи від безпекових. Ви знаєте, що Україна прийняла рішення Ради національної безпеки і оборони про стратегічну оборонну бюлетеню, який є просто дорожньою картою реформування сектора оборони і безпеки України. І велику допомогу в реформуванні дають нам країни НАТО через відповідні трастові фонди. Ми очікуємо прийняття рішень про продовження цієї співпраці і отримання нових амбітних проєктів нашої співпраці з країнами-членами НАТО. На зустрічі комітету будуть обговорюватися не лише безпекові питання, питання підтримки реформ в Україні. І особливо увагу будуть приділені позиції проведення суддівської реформи, реформи юридичної, реформи митного сектору, реформи Державної фіскальної служби, підтримка антикорупційних кроків України, енергозабезпечення і інших напрямків. Але наголошую, це саміт НАТО, і першочергова увага буде приділена питанням безпеки, розширення оборонної співпраці, військово-технічної співпраці, і велика кількість напрацювань на сьогоднішній день вже існує, і думаю, що вона буде реалізована під час комісії. І головне, ми очікуємо підтримку Альянсу. Ми очікуємо, щоб ті позиції, які були задекларовані під час Бухарестського саміту, ключові з яких є, що двері НАТО відкриті для будь-якої європейської країни. Дякую.
Well, I should begin by thanking you for promoting me. Let me just add very quickly to what the President said, because the President has really summarized what will happen there. And as I mentioned earlier, the NATO-Ukraine Commission is going to meet at the level of heads of state, which is a very important statement in and of itself. They will approve a comprehensive package, an assistance package, to streamline and consolidate the NATO support for building the capacity of Ukraine's armed forces. And NATO will also welcome Ukraine's progress on defense reforms, particularly on civilian oversight of the armed forces and its move towards NATO standards. So that will be recognized. In addition, we have strongly supported, the United States has strongly supported not only that package, but we have contributed in kind to 4 of the 6 trust funds that were mentioned by President Poroshenko, specifically the command and control, the cyber, the medical rehabilitation, and logistics. Now, in addition to that, let me just say that the United States stands by our open door policy. We'll welcome new members when they're ready. As President Poroshenko himself has said on several different occasions, Ukraine has a long way to go in order to modernize and reform its defense sector and increase its interoperability with NATO, which is part of the discussion that takes place in the context of the NATO-Ukraine Commission. And he himself and your country has not yet made a decision as to whether or not you want to apply for membership. I can assure you that Ukraine's newly announced and launched defense reform effort, which includes measures to enhance civilian control of the military, is very welcome. It's a very important part of the democratic process, also a very important part of working together in the interoperability with NATO, and is a part of Ukraine's stated intent to cooperate more with NATO in the framework of the distinctive partnership that it currently has. So we will continue to work on that, and the future will be determined as decisions are made here and elsewhere that fit whatever the dynamics are at that particular time. But right now, anything else would be premature.
Thank you, Press. Thank you very much.
Що це таке?
Присядь!
Ой,